Coming to you from fabulous Las Vegas.
The right side is the winning side.
The late move is the correct move.
Sports betting capital of the world.
We all know when a sharp like me weighs in, the lines move.
It's a party for your ears. This is The Buffet with Chad and Scooch.
I want to buy that guy a buffet.
We're back. It's the Buffet Podcast brought to you by the Action Network. On the phone with me from New Orleans, bookmaker there and all the Boyd Gaming books in the state of Nevada, Mr. Bob Scucci. What's going on, brother?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm good. In our never-ending sort of technical challenges, today you are going to be on your cell phone through Skype. So that's exciting for people. They'll have something to talk about.
I'm sure the quality's great.
Hey, listen, can we talk about last weekend, which, let's see.
Oof.
Let's see. The Jets, they did not cover. Not the Jets. The Bears did not cover. The Bears did not cover against the Eagles. The Jets did not cover against the Panthers. The Dolphins did not cover as double-digit dogs, and my Scooch Roulette pick against the Patriots, although they left that back door freaking wide open up there in New England, and the Dolphins just it's like they kept fumbling their keys. They were really drunk, and they were fumbling their keys, and they couldn't figure out how to get the key in the lock, and they kept sort of walking to one side of the door and the other, and then finally they just gave up and went back to the bar because they decided they just didn't want to go home because it was too hard to get in the back door.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate description. It was pretty painful to watch from our end.
The Colts did not cover. That game had a middle opportunity because they opened at 4.5 and closed at 3, and that game landed on 4. The Niners did not come close to covering in one of our favorite scenarios, which is a relatively long home dog. I mean, dude, what the freak?
I mean, starting from Thanksgiving with all three favorites. I mean, I know the Chargers were only a 1-point favorite, so it wasn't a big favorite. But all the favorites covered on Thanksgiving, so that kind of started the snowball, which became the avalanche for Sunday. We lost every single morning game, which is rare. I mean, at least most mornings we win at least one or two key games. But this was the first week in years where we lost every single game. The only underdog that didn't cover in the morning games were the Bills against the Chiefs. But we actually needed the Chiefs. It was the only favorite we needed. The game opened 10.5 and it closed 7.5. So everybody was all over the Bills, including the sharp guys and the public. So after that wicked morning, I actually made some phone calls and just kind of gave my executives kind of a heads up that, hey, we might be in for what could be the worst weekend ever. And I'm not exaggerating. There was really, after the morning games, we needed basically a sweep of the two games that we ended up getting. We needed the Steelers to lose, and we needed the Jaguars to lose. The Cardinals at that time were up against the Jaguars. So when I made those calls, I just said, hey, guys, this is the key game. If we don't get the Cardinals, we're going to get destroyed today. And then the same thing with the Steelers. I said, the liability on the Steelers game on Sunday night is going to be triple what it is now if the Jaguars cover. And no sooner was I on the phone with them than the Cardinals, same thing that the Jets did with McCown. They dropped back to pass and a fumble recovery that picked up, ran in for a touchdown. The Jaguars tied it up, and I was already sweating that game. If the Jaguars won that game by 6, it would have been just total devastation. It would have been the worst weekend for the sports books. But luckily, we ended up pulling out that game. It was still a horrible Sunday, don't get me wrong, but it could have been so much worse.
what do you say to your bosses? Like, what do your bosses say when you tell them this is going to be one of the worst weekends we've ever had?
Usually they just say, "Oh, great, thanks." There goes the quarter. There goes the month. There goes pretty much everything. I mean, they're actually really good because we've been through this kind of thing many times before. It's never easy. It's never an easy call to make. Because it's usually Sunday. Those guys are usually doing something. It's usually their days off and everything. Like I said, it's never an easy call. But they're pretty good about it.
So listen, I didn't even talk about what's on the show today, and it's an epic show. We are doing an executive decision. Someone's going to come on in a few minutes. A listener to the podcast who has a classic need. What is that? What is that? Is someone calling you right now?
That's actually my boss. Yeah.
Do you want to take that?
Can you hang on for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
Sports Bob.
Scooch, I think it's appropriate. I think it's appropriate that your boss called while we were talking about what you tell your bosses. Do you still have a job?
It's pretty ironic. I mean, it's not like he calls me a lot, so that was a big coincidence.
When your boss calls, do you freak out? Are you like, oh my God, do I have to answer this? Like, what is going on? Did I do something wrong? Do you start going through like the list of things in your head that might have gone wrong that you think he could be calling about, and you're like getting ready for what the answer will be?
Because it could. Yeah, no, exactly. You have no idea what it could be. It could be anything in the world. It could be something simple, but it could be something big. So you just don't know. And so I go through a little process where, I try to decide what needs to be done right now.
I like Scared Scooch. Scared Scooch is fun.
Oh, look at this. Things are always on edge after a bad weekend, too. I can tell you that much. After a good weekend, everything's real nice and peachy. Everybody's in a good mood. You got kind of another week to go before you start getting into game mode again for the next weekend. But after a bad weekend, everybody's on edge. You're wondering where the next domino is going to fall, and you're scared of the next game.
Listen, Scooch, we have to get to I have to finish the intro, which your boss so rudely interrupted, because we have a massive show today. We have the executive decision from a guy, Mike Carroll's from Oklahoma, who's got a very serious question that is an age-old dilemma involving his wife and a trip to Vegas. I did an interview. You might remember that you did this with me at ESPN. We had a segment called You Bet Your Life on the podcast. So we are bringing it back to the buffet. And the first one is with Clay Travis, the emperor of Outkick the coverage, one of the biggest firebrands in media today. This past weekend, he led the charge to make sure the University of Tennessee did not hire Greg Schiano as its coach. He is based in Nashville, and he's going to come on and talk about the biggest risk he's ever taken, because there are risks that don't involve your bankroll, and so he's going to talk about sort of the risks that he took that have paid off, and the ones that didn't. Then you and I are going to go back. We're going to come back to the podcast. You and I are going to talk about our games, and then we're going to do Scooch Roulette. Are you ready for all that?
I'm ready for it all.
All right. So first up, we're going to bring up Mike Carroll's, who's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So listen, here's the dilemma. I'm going to read it. You know what? I'm not even going to read it. Mike Carroll's, give me the lowdown on what it's a great dilemma. It is so age-old classic dilemma. Tell us the dilemma.
Okay, so I paid off my house over the summer, and I want to celebrate, and I want to go to Vegas for my birthday, the 15th through the 18th. But my wife cannot go. There's like an issue with her job, and so she can't go. But she gave me the green light to go ahead and go by myself. But my dilemma is, do I actually go? On one hand, I feel like I've earned it because, I paid off my house. I want to celebrate, and it's my birthday. I'm looking to go December 15th through the 18th, and my birthday's on that Monday, so I'd actually get back and be able to spend it with my wife. But she's fine to give me the go-ahead to go. But here's the important part I left out. We got engaged in Vegas on my birthday 12 years ago. So do I go to quote unquote our place without her and take this trip that I feel that I've earned? And I'm definitely leaning towards going, but I need you guys to weigh in on whether I should or should not go.
I mean, I see this so clearly that maybe it's just a judgment about me, how clearly I see this. Scooch, you can go first.
Oh, no. I wanted to hear what you saw so clearly first. But, so now you're talking to a newlywed. So from my perspective, it's going to depend on how that, when she gave you the permission to go, was it oh, honey, you should absolutely do this? Or was it, fine, go ahead?
No, it was please, not, it wasn't please go, but it was, yeah, you should do this. She went, and also background, she went to Kansas City by herself last month to go to some concert, which I couldn't go to because I couldn't get off work because I can't have the weekends off during football season. I'm sure you know that,
Okay.
Scooch. So
yeah, absolutely. So here's my take. I think you should definitely go. You've earned this. She's okay with it. This is an opportunity for you that you want to do, and your happiness is important. So I say go.
I have a couple questions here. First of all, who did she go to see in concert in Kansas City?
I'm totally going to mispronounce this, but Kesha?
Kesha.
Kesha. Okay.
Kesha's great. She's great. Kesha's fantastic. That's totally. I would go see Kesha in concert. I really would. I think she's awesome. Kansas City, as everybody knows, Kansas City is the Vegas of the Heartland. And so it's exactly the same. I can see why you would use that as sort of a token in whatever logic argument you're making as to why you can go to Vegas. But ultimately, here's what I think. I think that you, as the husband, cannot be responsible for intuiting any glimmer of resentment or idea that your wife has that she doesn't want you to go. I think you have done your diligence. You have said, honey, I want to go to Vegas this weekend. We paid for our house. That is a really big deal. I want to go blow some cash because now I've got cash to blow.
That's right.
I want to make some bets, and I'm going to come back for my birthday, and we're going to celebrate it, and we're going to celebrate the fact that I won all these bets or the fact that I lost, and it doesn't matter because we're not paying a mortgage. And she said, great, you should go. Even if she isn't thinking, great, you should go, if she's thinking, don't go, like, you should go. Because she seems like a wonderful woman, and she loves you, and she supports you, and she has said, I want you to be happy. And you should go guilt-free into the Vegas night and spend as much money as you possibly can, and then go back with a very nice gift from Vegas for your birthday and give it to her, and you guys go out for dinner that Monday night.
Hey, that's a great idea. I definitely will do that. I should call you more often for some aspect then.
Well, listen, I'm not going to give you my phone number.
Oh,
but
no,
you have,
his head's going to get so big now.
Yeah.
My God.
But you've clearly got my email, so you can email me anytime you need relationship advice.
All right. But yeah, I'm looking at flights right now, so I'm going to book it. I appreciate it.
You know what you're going to do? By the way, you know what you're going to do when you get there?
What?
You're going straight to the Orleans, and you're going to get a buffet from Scooch for coming on the podcast.
I'll do that.
Special thanks to Mike Carrolls from Oklahoma for coming on to give us his executive decision dilemma, which we expertly weighed in on. Now we are going to Clay Travis, who is going to be doing the You Bet Your Life segment, talking about the biggest risks he's ever taken and if they paid off. All right, on the Buffet podcast, we are bringing back one of my favorite segments from the old ESPN days called You Bet Your Life. My first guest on the Buffet version of You Bet Your Life is the leader of the Outkick the Coverage empire, a man who has built a media empire entirely on his own, Clay Travis, at Clay Travis on Twitter. How you doing, buddy?
I'm excellent. How are you guys?
I am great. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast and doing this. So it's a very simple premise. I'm going to ask
you, by the way, on the new gig. It's exciting.
Thank you very much.
Success. I know a lot of good things and cool things happening in the sports gambling arena and beyond. So I think it's good timing on your part.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you've been a huge advocate for gambling and pushing gambling sort of as a conversation piece and from a not being afraid to talk about a piece for a while. And so every little bit helps. The premise for this segment is simple. I'm going to ask you one question that I think a lot of people get interested in, because a lot of people are always trying to figure out how to manage risk in their lives, not just with their bankroll when they're talking about sports betting. And the question is this. Tell me the biggest risk you've taken in your life.
It was starting Outkick the coverage. I don't think there's any doubt beyond that. In 2011, I thought that my career was at an absolute apex. I thought things couldn't get any better. I was doing a local radio show from noon to 3 every day that was going very well. I was writing at fanhouse.com as a national columnist. I had just returned from the Auburn and Oregon national title game. And when I got there, got back, I went in to talk about it sit on a panel in the Titans stadium here in Nashville, where I live. And it was about the future of sports media. Turned off my phone, and when I turned it back on, Fanhouse, which some people may remember, fanhouse.com, no longer existed. And so I suddenly didn't have a writing job. And so I was making, I think, right around $40,000 a year with a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, a wife, obligations as a family man, a mortgage, school loans, all of those things that your typical normal guy would have. And I lost my job. And it was 2011. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do? And the toughest thing about it was I had a contract extension that was going to pay me 6 figures sitting on, which to me at that time was like, you might as well have been paying me $5 million a year. 6 figures to write was a dream gig for years to come. And it was sitting on my boss's boss desk and hadn't been signed off on to become a reality. So I had a decision to make. What do I do? Do I contemplate maybe trying to get back into doing something with the practice of law in a non-sports arena, or do I effectively double down on the career that I'm trying to make for myself and start my own media company in a time when, frankly, it was a scary time, right? 2011, people are still coming out of the recession. It's not as if it's amazingly fantastic media environment in general. And so it's now been 6 years, and I started Outkick, and it has become the best decision I've ever made. And I don't think I would be anywhere near where I am now if I had not done that.
So when did you realize it was the best decision that you ever made?
So I got laid off at Fanhouse along with a lot of other people in the very beginning, I believe, of 2011, like January of 2011. And I was going to be paid until I think I got paid through March. And that was how much of a runway they kind of gave us. And I spent months kind of going back and forth, contemplating what the right decision to make was there. I was discussing it with my wife. You know, at the time I am 32 years old. So look, 32 is not old, but it's not that young either. You know, it's not like you're 24 or 25 and you think, okay, this is just a minor setback. And ultimately, I remember kind of the crystallization coming. I talked a lot with my father-in-law, who had his own business. And I remember him saying, like, when you make a decision like this, think about what the worst case scenario is. What's the most money that you could lose? And I ran the math on it, and I was like, I don't know, $20,000. And he was like, okay, I mean, that sounds like a lot of money to you now. But he said, I'm telling you from a business perspective, it's not. And then I remember driving around in Nashville and looking at everybody opening up these brand new bars, right? Like in restaurants, and thinking, man, if I were going to be doing that, I would be investing, a ton of capital, and it might all get lost. In worst case scenario, if I start this website and it doesn't work and I can't sell it and we can't build it and it doesn't have any success at all, then I'm going to lose $20,000, and I can just, kind of go back hat in hand and try to get hired elsewhere. And I decided to roll the dice and start my own site. And I did it, by the way, doing everything. I sold all the ads. I wrote all the articles. I did all the promotion. I mean, I was a one-stop shop, and it's been the best decision that I ever made.
why is it only the thing that you could afford to lose, is the money? That's always the interesting question to me, is people base sort of the risk of a decision. And by the way, I did the same thing in deciding to stay or go at ESPN and go to the Action Network, is what is the upside I am leaving on the table at ESPN? What is the potential upside of going to the Action Network? What is the delta between the sort of the security of one place versus the risk of the other? And a lot of it was about the money, but also a lot of it was about sort of the psychic risk not taken, and how much of that was in play when you were deciding the worst that can happen is $20,000 loss, but also on the other side of happiness, not to be sort of melodramatic about it.
Well, I would like to be able to be on the side of happiness, but I always think the side of happiness is a nice one to be on when you actually have money. I can be on the side of happiness now. When I decided whether or not to take my national Fox Sports Radio morning show that requires me to get up in the 4 a.m. hour every day, I decided based on happiness, because I don't need to make money. Is this something that's going to be more fulfilling to me? When you're making $40,000 a year and you got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, that's a scary time to take a risk. And so I had a mortgage to pay. I had a family to worry about. And so, yes, the risk-reward analysis was in there, but I frankly couldn't have afforded to risk $200,000 on this proposition, right? I just didn't have the money. I didn't have the assets. I didn't have the ability to do that. And if I lost, then my family's financial future would be broken. I had a negative net worth at the time by several $100,000 already with a mortgage. The last thing I needed to do was suddenly put more money out there. But for me, what I have done as I have continued to amass an audience and grow is I've consistently made decisions that give me more creative freedom. And I have turned down more money in order to maintain creative freedom, because I think that authenticity and honesty, and people attack me for not believing what I say. And, the people who listen or read me pretty frequently, like, there's a consistency to what I say, and I believe everything that I say. And there's zero doubt that I could say probably a quarter of what I say now if I were employed by a major media company in sports right now compared to what I can say now. One day, maybe that'll change. Maybe somebody will say, you know what? We want the full Clay Travis. Just bring what you're doing. It's obviously working. But so far, it's always been like, oh, we like this, but we wish you would give up that. And my argument is like, the reason why people love me is because they get this and that. I'm not willing to give up one or the other.
Well, yeah, you've become a particular firebrand for ESPN and sort of politically in the last, say, 12 to 24 months. It's obviously become much more high profile during the Trump campaign and presidency. Was there a risk assessment with that particular move?
Not really. I mean, I love politics, and I like sports, and I like gambling, and Game of Thrones. I think we've entered into this weird universe where people are like, "Oh, you should only talk about X." And I'm like, "Why?" If you went to a dinner party and you sat down and somebody was like, "Okay, tonight at the dinner party we're only going to talk about sports," you'd be like, "God, this is a boring ass dinner party, right? I don't want to go hang out with dudes or girls, and all we're going to do is sit around and talk about one subject." And I feel the same way about politics or Game of Thrones, right? Or I'm just using Game of Thrones as a pop culture example. Could just as easily be Stranger Things too. But to me, what is natural is the intertwining and connection of all of those topics across the board. And I thought we started doing live Periscopes and Facebook shows a couple of years ago, daily, way before everybody else. And what I found worked really well there was reacting to news events that just finished. And the Republican and Democratic debates, in particular the Republican debates with Donald Trump starting in 2015, that late summer, were must-see television. And so when I started reacting to those, people loved it. And now, honestly, if you poll my followers and say, do you think Clay Travis is better talking about sports or politics? It's probably 50-50. And I worked in politics before I did sports. I think I'm pretty good about breaking it down in a relatively non-biased fashion. And so it was a calculated decision, but it was also one governed by, hey, people want this. I have always said that starting my own site was important because it allowed me to see the Google analytics for what people actually want to read. There's still a lot of people out there writing things that they think people want to read, and then the numbers don't reflect it. It's writers writing what they want to write. I write what I want to write, but I also write what I know people are going to read and care about.
But there's also a calculus with that, right? Like, you don't know what someone's going to want until you've started doing it. You didn't know people are going to want you on politics until you started doing it.
Correct. And look, I mean, I think there's a fearlessness associated with that too. I always say that what I try to do is at Outkick is using the acronym SOFA: smart, original, funny, and authentic. And I think fearless is kind of the connective tissue that binds all those letters S, O, F, and A together. And what I would say is, nowadays, if I write a story, I can tell you pretty much how many readers it's going to get, roughly. Now, sometimes they catch fire, but that internal calculus is important in terms of knowing what people are going to respond to and what they like about what I do. Look, I mean, I host a national radio show. There are lots of times that I would prefer to talk about my favorite NFL team, the Tennessee Titans. That's a good thing about doing local radio, right? You get to talk about the local team in the market. Nobody cares about the Tennessee Titans in LA. They're not any good. Nobody cares in Seattle or New York or Tampa. So you got to pick which the big national stories are. And sometimes that's different than the story that you would prefer to talk about. Having said that, like, national radio is a lot better in many respects, because while it's fun to talk about your favorite local team on Monday, I have done so many local sports talk radio shows where you talk about who the team's going to draft in May for 2 months. As soon as March Madness ends, all the way up to the NFL draft, that's all anybody wants to talk about. Who is insert team going to take here with their insert pick here? And as a sports talk radio host, sometimes you just want to shoot yourself in the head, and you're like, oh God, another 3 hours of callers saying, well, I think the team should do this. And you're like, okay, we've literally heard every possibility of what could happen with this draft pick, and it happened in a day, and we've got to talk about it for 60 days.
Tell me about the calculus to start going nuclear on Greg Schiano.
I mean, there's no calculated look. What I always do is I give my exact opinion. So the minute I heard that Tennessee was going to hire Greg Schiano, I said, I don't approve of this hire. And I will do anything to keep Tennessee from hiring him, because I think it's the wrong move for the program. And so I didn't know if everybody else was going to agree with me. I'm not the kind of guy who sticks his thumb up in the air, checks to see which way the wind is blowing, and then looks over his shoulder to see whether or not people are lining up behind him or lining up in front of him to disagree with. I just give my opinion every day. And this happened to be an opinion that was shared by the vast majority of the Tennessee fan base. And so yesterday, as that story kind of broke, I was obviously a big part of that story. But the reason why I was a big part of that story is for the same reason that we've gotten to have such a big audience at Outkick, because lots of people trust me to be honest with them every day. And the Tennessee fan base, 90% of them, I would say at least, did not want Greg Schiano.
All right, last question for you. Tell me where, when you're looking at Google Analytics, gambling ranks in terms of the kind of coverage that drives people to your site.
Well, it's very popular in the context of, like, I do a gambling picks column on Wednesday, and sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of people will come in to read that college football picks column. My picks are just 50% roughly this year. It hasn't been a good year, but I've been doing it for 5 years. And I think people love having a rooting interest, either like, oh, I love Clay, his picks are awesome, or I hope Clay's picks go 0-10, So as a part of our show and our site, we talk gambling a lot, and that is pretty popular. Now, it's not as popular as a lot of other things that go up on the site or that we discuss, because the gambler cares immensely, but there are still a lot of people out there who don't gamble at all. And so now it's better to me than fantasy talk, because the thing I love about gambling is if you're on one side or the other, let's say it's Auburn and Georgia, the line's right around 2. Everybody has a side in Auburn, Georgia -2. If you're talking about fantasy football, almost nobody has the same dispute. Do I start Jordy Nelson or do I start, Rashard Matthews, right? Like, nobody cares about that. So I think that's a challenge in general. that's positive for gambling is that everybody cares. Everybody's on one side or the other and has a rooting interest.
Well, I hope it continues, brother.
Yeah. I'm going to be in D.C. next week to watch that Supreme Court argument live. I can't wait.
All right, well, we'll be following you along at Clay Travis on Twitter. Outkick the coverage, the show, Outkick the coverage, the website. Thank you for coming on You Bet Your Life, Clay.
Appreciate it, my man. And again, congratulations on your success. And I'd encourage everybody to bet their life. Take a risk. You'll be glad that you did.
All right. Thank you very much to Clay Travis for coming on and being the first guest in the reimagination of You Bet Your Life. Scooch, guess what time it is?
Time to go through these games?
We got to talk about some games. Got a lot of games to talk about.
Okay.
I do think we need to give a nod. We need to give a nod, and we'll do these sharp and fast. But I do think we need to give a nod to the championship games. Like, we got to talk about Ohio State, Wisconsin. We got to talk about Clemson and Miami. We got to talk about Oklahoma and TCU. And we got to talk about Auburn and Georgia, just because so much money on those games, so many people talking about those games. Of those 4 games right now, where is most of the action going?
Okay, so money definitely on Georgia right now, plus the points against Auburn, but the public is on Auburn. So we had a couple of big bets on Georgia, but most of the bets are on Auburn, thinking that they're gonna sweep Georgia this year. And Auburn's just such a hot team. Even last week, all the money was on Auburn against Alabama, both from sharp guys and it was a little strange to have both weighing so heavily on Auburn, but definitely the hot team. As far as the Clemson-Miami game, all money on Clemson. We actually opened this game 7.5 early, just quickly went to 8.5, went right up to 9. So we moved it pretty quickly. We just kind of saw where the trend was going to be in terms of the public money, even though there are a lot of small bets. So we're at 9 right now on Clemson, a lot of money on Clemson. I think that's going to continue. The Wisconsin-Ohio State game, not as lopsided, but definitely leaning a little bit more towards Wisconsin. And I think just the sentiment there is they're just getting so many points. I guess the betting public has been burned enough laying points with Ohio State. So sharp guys haven't really weighed in on it, but public leaning a little bit more towards Wisconsin. Those are mainly.
What about Oklahoma and TCU?
We opened 7, Oklahoma 7. We're still at 7. Definitely the public on Oklahoma. But the sharp guys are taking the +7, and it's almost dead even in terms of money. The ticket count, though, is just really skewed heavily on Oklahoma. So about 5-1 in terms of the ratio of bets on Oklahoma to TCU. But we haven't gotten off of 7.
Doesn't sound like you got a lot of sharp action on anything right now.
So the sharp guys have kind of changed their strategy a little bit, and they're kind of playing with these lines, kind of knowing that they're not going to tip their hand early in the week, especially on the bigger games. And a lot of times, if you do see a move, it's usually not a correct move. It's a move to get you to go one way, and then we'll see the line change closer to game time. So they've kind of changed the sharp guys kind of changed their betting strategy over the course of a season, or even over the course of a couple of years.
Hey, you know what? You just said something.
What?
You just said something that makes me think we can go to a Scoochism.
The late move is the correct move.
All right, great. I'm so excited. We got a Scoochism. We're coming back. We're bringing the Scoochisms back. So, all right, well, that's all good to know on colleges. Then we can get to the real games, which is the NFL, which is Week 13. I'm kidding about the colleges. It's very important, the colleges. But the first game is so interesting. This Thursday game, the Redskins are 1.5-point favorites. And, for what may be the second or third week in a row, the public is so against the Cowboys. Like, a team that historically has been public-driven, people are fading this team as fast as they possibly can. This morning, in the Action Network newsletter, which you can sign up for on actionnetwork.com, I wrote that, the Cowboys are the plush toy in the remainder bin right now. Nobody wants them. If this were the retail business, I think it's the exact time to bet the Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree with you. The the public, we talked about it so many times that they just remember what they've seen recently. And now the last 3 weeks, there's absolutely no reason for them to kind of have confidence in the Cowboys. On the other side of the coin, the Redskins, even though they played the Giants, they did cover, and that's important to the bettors. They keep coming right back on the teams, win them money each week. So the public is all over the Washington in this one. We opened up the Cowboys 1.5. The line moved 2.5 points to the Redskins -1, and I could probably see it going up to 1.5, 2, or even 2.5 by game time, because the public is just going to drive this line up. I think it's a good spot for the sharp guys to bet the Cowboys. They haven't weighed in yet, but when you see this line get up to 2, I think they almost have to take the Cowboys in this one. I mean, the Cowboys have just been dealing with these injuries, and at some point with Tyron Smith back, if they get Sean Lee, that's really the key back on defense. But as far as the public, they want no part of Dallas right now.
You know who I want no part of right now?
Who?
Denver or Miami. These teams are dumpster fires. I can't even. These are two marquee NFL teams that have turned into a corner TV game.
It really has. This is I'm looking at the ticket count here. By far, there's the least amount of tickets written on this game than any game on the board, by far. Somehow, though, the sharp guys see a little something in Denver, because we just had a move this morning from Denver 1 to Denver -2, 2.5 places now. So again, I'm not sure if this is actually just a kind of fake out move, or if this is a legit they have. We really haven't seen, a lot of the big bets. We've kind of seen some trickle of bets on Denver. So interesting that they may have on this one of all games.
Scooch, how close are you to moving the line on the Broncos-Dolphins game right now?
We just moved it this morning, actually, so I don't know that I'm going to move it again. I was debating whether or not to go to 2.5, but I don't see enough money that would warrant it. And like I was saying before, it could be one of those fake out moves where they try to get you to go one way, then the real move late in the week is the other way. So I think I'm just going to hold off a little bit.
Let's talk about the Giants and the Raiders, since you just moved it from 8.5 to 9.
Line change!
I mean, that was going to be a marquee game that we were going to talk about just because of Eli. Again, we wrote about this in the Action Network newsletter, actionnetwork.com. Go sign up, put your email address in, get a newsletter that gives you everything you need to stay abreast of what's happening in the sports betting world. Eli Manning gets benched. The game comes down for about 20 minutes. When it goes back up, the point spread is exactly the same, which tells you that right now bookmakers don't value Eli Manning with any more points than they value Geno Smith.
Well, I think there's obviously a huge drop down, but I mean, we opened 7.5 and we're at 9, so that does say that that they were all over Oakland in this one. I still think it's probably just a little too many points for an Oakland defense that last week was really the first time they actually looked good, but the defense up to left really hadn't been able to stop anybody. So 9 points is a lot of points.
Are the wise guys on the Giants at +9 now?
No, they were on the Giants early, and they actually took +8 and +7.5. So now there's, I should say some of them are. There's a different group of professional handicappers now that are coming back and actually laying those same numbers. So another group laid the 7.5, laid 8, laid 8.5. So we're back up to 9 on the game. So this is a game that's been kind of going back and forth. The public is on the Raiders, but not at such a lopsided ratio that we saw in some of the other games. So it's not like they're like we would see on an Eagles or a Patriots game, but some real interesting movement on this, based on Eli Manning or the lack of Eli, I think.
Feels like the bettors are as schizophrenic as the Giants coach right now.
Well, they've been a hard team to kind of gauge. How do you explain, the winning games by when they're double digit underdogs, winning the game straight up, beating teams like Kansas City and Denver when we thought Denver was a lot better than they really are, and then just getting annihilated by the rest of the team. So not an easy team to gauge for sure.
Listen, we're going to have to go faster, Scooch, because I'm afraid Big Tony is going to call us like at any second. San Francisco, Chicago, another quarterback change. Jimmy Garoppolo, the great Jimmy Garoppolo, coming in, playing against his hometown team. I think he played in like college in Chicago or something. So the Chicago Bears are 3-point favorites at home against the San Francisco 49ers. Kind of a blah game generally. I can't imagine there's much action on this.
No, this is probably right next to the Broncos Dolphins games in terms of like the worst games on the board. And we'll get to the Texans and Titans, but that's probably the third one. But yeah, not a whole lot of action. No one really wants to bet either one of these teams. They're usually the bet against teams. So when one of these teams are playing any of the other teams in the NFL, they'll bet against the 49ers, the Bears. So when they're playing each other, there's really kind of no angle for the public. We have the Bears a 3-point favorite at home, which basically tells you that they're same caliber team. So not a whole lot of action from the sharp guys on this one either.
There is going to be action on New England and Buffalo. New England is an 8.5-point favorite on the road against Buffalo, which showed up last week, did what we thought they would do. They were the team we thought they would be. But boy, as they say, as I learned last week, as people have told me when I went against Bill Belichick as a 17-point favorite in Scooch Roulette, because that's what the book says to do, you don't make money betting against Bill Belichick.
You don't. I'm telling you, don't. You can't make a living betting against the Patriots. I've been saying that for years, no matter when the spot might be. And this certainly seems like the spot, almost a double-digit home dog. The Bills won straight up last week as a double-digit home dog against Kansas City. I don't know how much to read into that game, though, looking back and saying, okay, Kansas City coming off of that bye week actually loses as an 11-point favorite against the Giants straight up. They lose against as a 10.5-point favorite against the Bills. So maybe that was just a bad Kansas City team that the Bills beat. So this will be a better test, but certainly the sharp guys will take the Bills +9. We've already seen a couple of big bets from some people we respect on the Bills, but the public is just all over the Patriots. The ratio is about 10-1 on the ticket count. So it's going to be one of those games where, straight bet money will be on the Bills and everything else will be on the Patriots.
I'm telling you right now, I'm going with the Bills. I am publicly backing the Bills. I know. You know what I got to do? I got to Joel Embiid this. I got to trust the process.
Exactly. We talked about it last week. You hit on a 16 against a picture card. You can't change it up. You got to do it.
Exactly what I'm thinking. Kansas City, speaking of bad teams, now they're on the road. They're 3-point favorites against the Jets. Third straight week, they are road favorites against a team that has low expectations. I would take the Jets in this one too.
So the sharp guys already weighed in on this one as well. We opened 4 on this game. One of the first bets out of the gate was the +4. The ticket count's dead even. I think the public's going to be like 50-50 on this one. This is going to be kind of like a game, if you had to compare it last week when the Saints played the Rams. It was almost dead even, 50-50 with the public on one side and the public on the other. It was a very well bet game. So I think this is going to be one of those games that's we're going to have quite a bit of action on it, but I think the public is going to be divided right down the middle, and the professionals will be on the Jets, another home dog.
Mike Grinnell, producer of the podcast, I just realized we have another opportunity for a Millmanism, because I think we have a Millmanism that is when you're sharp like me. And clearly, when I'm talking about the Bills and I'm talking about the Jets, I'm like a sharp. When a sharp like me weighs in, the lines move. I feel like Houston, Tennessee is the kale salad that we have to get before we get to talk about Minnesota and Atlanta. So if you want to talk about Houston, Tennessee for less than 15 seconds and say, nobody's interested in this game. We're not even going to turn it on. If we had an extra corner, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And just real quickly, the betting is like 50-50, dead even on Texans and Titans, with the sharp guys weighing in a little bit on the Texans. And I think just this is like almost an identical game to Texans and Ravens that we saw on Monday night. Point spread's even the same. The Titans are -7 at home. So I think the sharp guys saw a little spark in the Texans that would make +7 seem like a little value.
All right. Let's talk about the Falcons, who are 3-point favorites against Minnesota. Minnesota's really good. They keep covering. The Falcons all of a sudden are finding their, wait for it, wings. So what do you do here?
This was really an easy line to make, to be honest. Two teams that we consider to be dead even right now in terms of popularity with the public, in terms of how recently they've covered big point spreads. And so basically a pick'em game with the Falcons at home, home field advantage. 3 points we figure is a solid number, but we know that the betting public is going to be on the Vikings. So it's kind of like we knew the line should really be between 2.5 and 3. So it's kind of a lean towards a pick'em, but we're going to go into it with just a solid 3. Let the public bet the Vikings, and we'll just go into the game needing the Falcons. It's one of those games where we just are clearly know we're going to need a side. We're not going to try to manipulate the line to change anything in that. So we're just going to hope that the Falcons cover the 3 points.
And then you're going to call Big Boss Mr. Tony and be like, Mr. Tony, yeah, we knew we were taking a side on this, and we're going to lose, and I just want to let you know it's going to be ugly. So yep. Just so you know, for the rest of the day, we're going to be really, really huge Indianapolis Colts fans. That's what your day is going to come down to. Your day is going to come down to rooting for the Colts, which we're going to get to after Tampa Bay and Green Bay, the battle of the Bays.
Yeah. Not a whole lot of action on this game either. We know we have Tampa Bay -2 on this one. But without Aaron Rodgers, the public has just not wanted any part of Green Bay. Although after last week's performance against the Steelers, I think a lot of them may change their mind. But just it's not going to be one of the higher games on the board. It's going to be kind of maybe the 4th least bet game behind the Niners, Bears, Texans, Titans, and Broncos, Dolphins.
Well, you just listed basically every game. So
yeah, right.
Jacksonville, Indianapolis, the Jaguars are 9.5-point favorites. I think that's a little bit too much respect. I think you're going to get whacked on this game.
We have been just adjusting whatever line we should be making on the Jaguars. We keep adjusting it up a half a point, and then generally the public even moves it further by game time. And we saw it last week when we opened 4, the Jaguars against the Cardinals, and then that game closed at 6 with being buried at -6. I even saw some places go as high as 6.5. So it's kind of the same thing. We know that this line is really inflated. Absolutely no value on the Jaguars whatsoever. We just don't know if it's enough to dissuade the betting public. So if there's any value at all, it's on the Colts plus the 9.5.
Well, even a sharp guy like me can see that.
You are sharp.
There you go. Sometimes I feel like when you say that to me, it's like you are patting me on the head. You're sharp. You are sharp.
Yeah.
Silly boy. A little bit. Yeah. This is all of a sudden turning into an interesting team. The Baltimore Ravens, 3-point favorites over the Lions. Again, it feels like similar logic as what you have with the Falcons and the Vikings.
Yeah, and the only thing here is we just adjust slightly off of what we saw from the Lions on Thanksgiving. The money was all over Minnesota in that one. Not a whole lot of betting public support for the Lions. So knowing that, going up against the Ravens team in Baltimore, where the betting was actually more on Baltimore against the Texans Monday night. So we just took that into account. Just came up with another what we consider a solid line. I don't see this line moving one way or the other. I think the betting's 50-50 right now, maybe slightly leaning towards the +3 with the Lions, but very slightly, and no money yet from the professionals.
All right, our favorite team in the NFL, the team that we love to bet, even though it makes us so scared. The Los Angeles Chargers are almost 2 touchdown favorites over the Cleveland Browns. And by the way, I would lay that.
You finally jumped off the Browns, huh? You finally had enough?
I'm done.
Like I said last week, betting on the Browns from a professional perspective is like, when you have a hangover and you swear you're never going to drink again, and then the next week you're having another glass of wine and going through the same thing every weekend. We need the Browns. We have needed the Browns every weekend. They always seem to be in it right up to the very, very end, and somehow they just find a way. Forget about winning the game. We're not even looking for that anymore. We're just trying to hope that they find a way to cover one of these spreads, and we keep making these lines bigger and bigger. The Chargers 14. You really wouldn't have thought the Chargers would be a 14-point favorite against anybody at the beginning of the year. So we think this is about as high as you can get, but we haven't gotten any money on the Browns yet. So maybe we keep moving it up.
I mean, how amazing would that be if it ends up being the Chargers have the biggest number of the year because you can't get any money on the Browns? Let's talk about Carolina. Seriously. Let's talk about Carolina and New Orleans, because that's the battle for the NFC South. It is going to be the game that has a huge determination in playoff positioning. The Saints, dropped last week. The Panthers covered on the road in a game that I think a lot of people thought at the end of the day they might not be doing that. Saints -4.
Yeah, this is going to be a great game, and it's interesting as well as Panthers. I think have actually been playing recently. They haven't gotten any respect, and I know there was a few game stretch where we actually were shading the point spread a little bit to get money against the Panthers, knowing that the Panthers would cover. So this is kind of a quiet team that's the betting public really hasn't picked up, and they're just still enamored with the Saints. Even though the Saints kind of let them down a little bit against the Rams, that game was kind of, like I said, 50-50. But the Saints now going against the Panthers, there's actually no love for the Panthers here at all. The ticket count is about 1 Saints to Panthers, really high. The sharp guys haven't taken anything in this one yet, but again, we've been kind of high on this Panthers team. I know last week's game against the Jets was probably couldn't take a whole lot from it. They got kind of a pretty fortunate bounce that Luke Kuechly picked up a fumble to run it into the end zone, and eventually got the win and the cover for the Panthers. So I think the betting public, even though they may have had money on the Panthers, were just not really sold on them. We are. We actually think this team is they're just in a tough division, and this is an important game that we feel is going to be pretty close.
You have been on them all year. You know who else you have been on all year? The Los Angeles Rams are now 7-point favorites on the road against the Arizona Cardinals, with all the money coming in on LA. This is a hitting on 16 scenario here. Like, if you're going to be a guy who is contrarian, which I tend to be, and plays home dogs, which I tend to do, it's an automatic take with the Cardinals, and yet I have zero faith.
Yeah, no, this Rams has just been a juggernaut. It's kind of reminiscent of the last time the Rams actually won a Super Bowl. The year I just was never a believer, and they just kept rolling along, and even right up to the last game, I just wasn't completely sold on them. But we're just jacking up lines every week on the Rams, knowing that whatever our power numbers or power rankings and numbers say the line should be, we always end up moving it up a half a point, up a full point, and then the betting public will drive it up even further. And then the team just keeps covering on top of that. So we just can't slow it down. There's just a kind of an avalanche of money on this Rams team every week. and being it's one of the few afternoon games, it's going to be a huge decision for us. That's 2 weeks in a row. We're going to need this Cardinals team as a home dog, and I'm kind of with you on this one. I just don't have enough faith in this Cardinals team to slow down the Rams.
Hi, Mr. Tony. Listen, just so you know, you also need the Arizona Cardinals. Just so you know, the two teams that you need are the Indianapolis Colts and the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking of, at least when you call your boss and tell him that when the Eagles are killing the Seahawks, at least you will have known that you had to put faith in a team that is decent in the Seahawks. But it's the same conversation. Like, the Eagles are getting pounded by the public. They're getting 75% of the action. They're 6-point favorites. Like, nothing you can do there except hope and pray that the wise guys come in with some, 10-dime bets on the Seahawks.
Yeah, so we got a few of them actually. So Sunday night when we're making the lines, we're making the lines for this Sunday. We're looking at the numbers, and it came out the Eagles -3.5, and we're looking at this saying, there's no way we can hang this. So let's hang it 4.5. So we hung 4.5, and the first couple of real small bets were on the Eagles. And right away, I went to 5.5. I'm looking around at the numbers around town, and there's still some 3.5s at other places around town, and we're at 5.5. So I don't want to move it. I'm just inviting Seahawk money, like you just said. I don't care because I know that the game is going to probably close 6. Even though that some casinos are at 3.5 and 4. So we took a lot of money at +5.5. We took some money at +5 and +4.5. And it actually went right back to 5.5 with no money. After the big bets came in on Seattle, they slowed down. And then once they weren't betting it again, I went right back to 5.5. And then for some reason they stopped betting at +5.5. So I went to 6. And that's where I'm at now. So I do have quite a bit of money on Seattle, but it's all, like I said, sharp guys all on that first day that we hung the line. And we haven't had much on the Seahawks since then. It's been all public money on the Eagles. So really inflated line. You talk about an inflated line. It's the Eagles. And I would have thought that this would be a good spot for Seattle to deal a loss to Philadelphia, even at +3.5. I just know the public is going to lay a big number, but I do like the Seahawks in this spot.
God, here's what's crazy. The Steelers are on the road, 5-point favorites against the Bengals. That is also getting 70% of the tickets right now. As you talk about this game, I'm going to count the number of road favorites who are getting 70% of the money this weekend. You talk about the game. I'll do some counting.
Well, it's the same thing. The only thing that helps us in the betting in this one is that Cincinnati got a cover last week, and the Steelers did not get a cover last week. So when you talk about just the average fan, the casual fan that kind of remembers what happens recently, that thankfully dissuaded a little bit. But come Monday night, regardless of how the games fall on Sunday, everybody's going to bet favorite and over. So keeping that in mind, this is almost identical to what I just talked about in the Eagles game. We're getting some sharp money on the Bengals at +6, but I want to be high and be high on the Steelers, not just be high.
Mr. Tony.
Although after last week, I might want to be high. Who knows?
Scooch! People, you know what? People wouldn't expect that from you. You're a fun-time guy.
Yeah. That's what a couple of weeks of getting battered around the NFL will do to you, especially a couple bad weeks.
Look, I just counted, and we got to get to the Scooch Roulette picks, but there are 6 road favorites getting 70% of the tickets or more. The Redskins, the Broncos, the Patriots, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Los Angeles Rams. All those teams, road favorites of anywhere from 1.5 to double digits, and they are getting 70% of the tickets. Wow, you are in for a long weekend if the public has its way this weekend.
And I'll tell you what, the biggest game on the board the entire weekend, Seahawks. And because it's the Sunday night game. And recently, the Sunday night game has actually become even bigger than the Monday night. a lot of that is largely because there's been better matchups on Sunday night. There's been better games with more public teams. So these Sunday night games have just been an absolute nightmare for us. And I'm looking at this one, Eagles, the way that they've been riding, the way the betting public has been all over this team, and the numbers they're putting up. We're going to need the Seahawks for our lungs.
Yeah, there we go. Scooch, give me your Scooch Roulette pick.
Time to take down the hops.
When all hope is lost, all that's left is relief.
Let's play Scooch Roulette.
Well, since you let me go first, I have to take the Bills, go against the old saying.
Come on, man.
You don't make a living betting against the Patriots, but that's a huge number for the Bills at home.
I mean, that was going to be my pick. So I'm going to take the Seahawks then.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love them both. You know, we could switch them up if you like, because I like them both equally.
No, you're good.
Okay.
You got the Bills. I don't need to be bitten by Bill Belichick again.
A mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and I said it well the first time, by the way. Scooch, listen, I think you've got probably 18 calls from Tony that are waiting for you right now. So I'm going to let you go. But thank you for coming on the buffet with Chad and Scooch.